billion. And the guy that's running it, I think his name is Brad. I can't say his last name. Yeah. He seems like a very intellectual guy. He's involved on I've seen him with the Trump administration, a couple different things with them. But he doesn't just sound like one of these guys that came and created a coin. Hey, let's sell a bunch of stuff and then let's go. They're actually creating technology and buying technology. Good for them. So you're optimistic because you hear some people talk about Ripple could replace Swift, possibility of that. Of course, the likelihood of that happening is.
Good morning, guys. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Good Evening Crypto, your favorite crypto news related channel. And today is going to be a very exciting episode because I've got some great topics to cover in regards to the adoption of Ripple's technology. But I wanted to start off with that brief clip from the Patrick Bet-David show where Anthony Pompiano, a longtime Bitcoin advocate, was talking not positively, but having to admit defeat when it comes to the XRP community. Now I'm saving the long form breakdown of that video for the short form content we'll release at 5:30 p.m. So if you want a full breakdown of the Patrick Bet-David XRP conversation, tune in at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we're going to be breaking that down. But for today's episode, I've got some fantastic topics that we're going to cover during today's show. We've got Ripple being invited to the White House. We've got the Fed's plans to reduce rates once again. I've also got some bullish momentum when it comes to adoption of Ripple and the XRP ledger. We're going to talk about a new partnership in Africa, working with a $100 billion asset manager over in Africa. Ripple is now working on tokenized deposits and implementing blockchain products to improve their existing systems. But once again, I wanted to play just one more brief clip for you guys to kick off today's episode. This is a statement from Brad Garlinghouse. And why do I find this so relevant? Well, Brad was explaining the difference between the way Ripple operates and what the XRP ledger does. And I think my main takeaway here was, once again, there's a misconception in the American capital markets where people continue to think Brad Garlinghouse is the CEO of XRP. Brad Garlinghouse is the CEO of Ripple, and Ripple has a bunch of different business models that are responsible for driving new business onto the XRP ledger. But the XRP ledger would survive without Ripple, and that's a major caveat that newer investors should understand. During that Patrick Bet-David interview yesterday, where he was talking to Anthony Pompiano, long time, how do I put this? Let's just say three-letter agency, unconfirmed, right? He's only talked about Bitcoin positively since 2017. But if you look at his analysis of the crypto market back in 2017, Anthony Pompiano was speaking very positively about the XRP ledger. So what really caused that structural change? Well, we're going to break that down throughout today's episode. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself during today's show. We do already have 1,000 listeners joining us, guys. If you're excited and you enjoy this content, show us some love, smash that like button, let the YouTube algorithm know you enjoy this type of content. And as you guys can tell, we're rocking a solo dolo portion of the episode, but believe me, we've got plenty of exciting topics to cover for today. Let's just start off with one more brief clip from the Brad Garlinghouse interview yesterday during Washington, D.C.'s FinTech Week. And once again, this is the explanation of what Ripple does versus how the XRP ledger operates.
Well, so I think to some degree, the whole lawsuit for Ripple was about what is Ripple, which is a privately funded company that raised venture capital and issued stock associated with that. Those are securities. What is XRP, which is a technology, an open source technology that is kind of native to our products. We use XRP in our product stack, but there are scores of other companies building in and around the XRP ecosystem. People, will say things like, well, XRP has a CEO. And I'm like, who is it? Ripple has a CEO. That's me. There's scores, if not 100 other CEOs building around the XRP ecosystem. And I think that's when I hear people say that, I think, okay, they're not educated about what's going on. And so we need to educate people. Obviously, you see that in a number of other tokens where there's a very distributed, very open source community. People don't understand Ripple does not control XRP. It is open source. There have been amendments passed to the XRP open source technology that we opposed. We were against them and they still passed. That's okay. That's open source technology. There's other things we have championed that have passed, but it takes 80% of the community approving those amendments, which Ripple doesn't have control of that.
Mm-hmm. There you have it, guys. So again, what's the explanation there? Ripple is not the centralized entity controlling the XRP ledger. And I'm going to show you guys an IMF update at the end of this episode as well, where they're talking about the difference between central bank digital currencies and fiat currencies. And remember this, central bank digital currencies will be implemented during the Trump administration, not here inside the United States, but it starts offshore. It starts in some of these smaller countries like a Kazakhstan or a smaller European nation like Georgia, whose Ripple is publicly working with. All of these different amendments are being perfected behind the scenes. And I think that what we're really witnessing here is the regulation be established so that these small countries can start rolling out these central bank digital currency products. And people in these smaller environments, they don't even know what they're up against. To the uninformed person, a central bank digital currency sounds like free money. But to us informed investors and the people who have been in this space for a long enough period of time, we understand there's no such thing as free money. When the printing press turns on, the money that we have in our bank accounts becomes less valuable. And so central bank digital currencies essentially accelerates that. And they're even able to control things such as where you spend your money, what you're able to do, where you're able to spend that money, right? Maybe they give you a central bank digital currency, but you can only spend it in a 15-mile radius. These are the questions that we have to be aware of. And I want our listeners to kind of be very aware of those narratives as they start to roll out here in 2025. They're going to try to make this sound very normal. They're going to try to make it sound just like money. But at the end of the day, we know the concerns when it comes to a central bank digital currency. And I think the C-19 crisis really woke everyone up to how the centralized entities control us more than we perceive today. But guys, we're going to start this episode off just covering some of the daily movers. We've got Bitcoin trading just below 110,000, Ethereum just below $4,000, BNB token trading at about $1,200, XRP $2.40. We got Solana trading at $1.90, USDC $1. Why did I read USDC? I don't know. Cardano is 66 cents. Chainlink is $18. Stellar is 32 cents. And AVAX trading at about $22 this morning. And my belief is the same thing I've been sharing with you guys for a very long time. This market is about to get exciting. What we're really waiting on is for the U.S. government to resolve the spending crisis that I guess they're working on in the background. And when the U.S. government officials are back in office and these ETF products are approved, I'm anticipating inflows of north of $5 billion in the short term for projects like XRP. And that's not just some subjective number. I've listened to JP Morgan. We've heard Canary Capital. We've heard Grayscale. We've heard Bitwise. I've interviewed Sal Gilberti, who issued his own XRP ETF, and he's anticipating $20 billion worth of demand in the first calendar year. So there's huge opportunity here for many of our favorite altcoins, and we like to focus on XRP because that's where the most demand is right now. But you can apply this to many of these projects that have ETF approvals on the horizon. Could be an HBAR, could be an AVAX, could be even a Litecoin, guys. Litecoin, Polygon, some of these dead ecosystems are going to see inflows when these ETFs are turned on. And that's what our listeners should be preparing for here in 2025. We did just pass 225 likes on the episode. Want to give a massive shout out and thank you to everybody who enjoys this content. If you want to help us out, show us some love, smash that like button. A massive thank you to Richard in the chat with the $5.89 donation. He said, Abs, can I get the golden wrench? Richard, yes, you can. We'll get you a blue wrench. I don't know about a golden one here, but let's start talking about these inflows and what we can anticipate, and then we'll dive into our topic for today.
Yeah, well, that's what was like 3.2 billion in the first 3 billion in one day. So the capacity there for an ETF of seeing in excess of 5 billion in a month for XRP, you feel is underreported.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's a very safe bet, in my opinion. I certainly think that, I mean, let's go kind of back in time when we launched Bitcoin futures when I was with another firm. Mm-hmm. The first day there was over $1 billion in inflows, which made it at the time one of the top 10 of all time.
Yeah. Second
Bitcoin futures ETF to launch was still like number 14 of all time at 100 million. So, and that's just day one. So if you think what Bitcoin futures did, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if XRP outperforms what Bitcoin futures did. It's not going to have the same level as Bitcoin, obviously, right. But if it was $1 billion in one day, I mean, I think XRP does 2 or 3 billion day one.
Interesting. Well, and the
$2 or $3 billion day one. And here's the $1 billion question that we have to ask ourselves, guys, is are these ETF issuers already positioning themselves so that they can offer these products the second they're approved? Now, I think to a certain extent, they absolutely are, right? What do we know for sure? There's big players in the background working to accumulate these assets at lower prices. They essentially have an obligation to do so, right? If you're a Franklin Templeton client, you want access to the cheapest XRP possible. And I think that's their responsibility as asset managers. Well, Jake Claver did a great breakdown on this, and it's a little bit longer, but it's worth reading for our listeners during this episode, because right now, futures XRP ETFs do exist in the market today, but people continue to ask me the same question, and it's a really good question. Will we see new demand from these ETFs on day one? Jake Claver says yes, and that's what I'm going to read for our listeners during today's episode. We're just going to dive right into this content right now. Be sure to stick around because I am going to be breaking down how Ripple was just invited to the White House for an exclusive celebration dinner. So be excited about that content. But here's what Jake Claver had to say about the ETFs and the new demand that will enter this market after these products are approved. Futures ETFs, which exist today, don't buy a single token of XRP, not one. They roll contracts, they settle in cash, and there's zero impact on supply because they never touch the underlying asset. It's paper trading dressed up in an ETF wrapper. The fund managers, they buy futures contracts, and those contracts get rolled before expiration. Even if someone took delivery, they just sell it right back. There's no constraint on the XRP supply through these futures products, meaning there's zero demand pressure that would actually push the price up. So again, when you're watching these CME inflows, and they're getting a lot of attention right now, guys. We're seeing CME over $1 billion worth of interest for XRP. That doesn't impact the value of the token at all, not even 1 cent. These spot ETFs are going to be something completely different. And that's what Jake goes on to explain right here. Spot ETFs have to actually buy the underlying token XRP. Every dollar worth of inflows requires purchasing of tokens that get locked in custody. It's either Coinbase or Anchorage Digital that holds them, and they buy every share at ratios from 5 to 50 XRP per share. So that means, let's say, hypothetically, Grayscale is offering a spot XRP product, but it's 5 units of XRP per share. That's what Jake is referencing right here. That XRP is then permanently removed from circulation unless people decide to divest. So again, removing XRP from circulating supply through this new underlying demand. And even on a more optimistic note, I shared this with my friend over the weekend who was like, he's becoming more of a Bitcoin maximalist by the day. And I keep telling him, focus on the evolution of the asset class. Don't focus on the short-term price action. But guys, when you look at the market that went down 90% over the weekend, what was not 90%? Some projects went down 90% over the weekend. What was the differentiating factor here for Bitcoin? Well, there's ETF issuers sitting there on Monday morning buying $1 billion worth of Bitcoin in the first 10 minutes. When we have these products available for XRP, for Solana, for Ethereum, we're going to see a lot of the volatility that we're dealing with today be diminishing over time, because during these bearish times, there's going to be steady buying. And during these bullish times, there's going to be a little bit of profit taking by these smarter players in the market. So keep that in mind, guys. Volatility is diminishing as this asset class grows. And that works in favor of new investors because we're going to get huge speculative pumps. But the downside is, guys, as this market goes on, there's less and less opportunity to make generational wealth. Luckily, we're all here before that moment. But let's continue with what Jake had to say. So again, this XRP from the spot ETFs is permanently removed from circulation unless individual investors decide to divest those assets. Spot ETFs have to buy actual units of XRP. Every dollar of inflows requires purchasing of tokens that get locked up in custody. Coinbase or Anchorage Digital holds them, and they back every share at ratios of 5 to 50 XRP per share. That XRP, once again, is permanently removed from circulation unless people decide to divest. We watched this play out with Bitcoin. Futures existed since 2017, but the spot ETFs launched in January of 2024, and that's how things actually moved up in a big way. And we really saw this happen on a marketing standpoint as well. I've got some good examples of this that we'll dive into later in the episode, guys. But look at what happened with Bitcoin's marketing campaign. Guys like Larry Fink, who would do anything but validate Bitcoin investors, they now became the biggest advocates. They now talked about a flight to quality, digital gold. They were sitting at the World Economic Forum being interviewed by CNBC, and we had both Bank of America and BlackRock, segment after segment, speaking about the positive aspects of Bitcoin. Well, the second that they're able to profit off of these altcoins through these spot ETF products, we're going to see the same narrative flip. We're going to see these guys start talking about how XRP, they really built something special because they took the treasury that was established and they used that to acquire real companies. Duh. That's been the game plan from day one. And I think that our live chat understand that even better than some of the smartest investors in the space today. even better than a guy like Larry Fink is leading on these mainstream media platforms. But let's continue here. We watched this play out with Bitcoin. Futures existed since 2017, but they didn't impact the price because they don't have to buy the underlying asset. But once January 2024 came around and big companies launched their own Bitcoin products, spot ETFs created real demand against the limited supply for Bitcoin. Well, XRP is essentially doing the same thing here. XRP is building pressure and futures ETFs. We're just checking the regulatory boxes. But the SEC generally wants 6 months of futures trading before it approves any spot products, and XRP is officially past that now. Once these spot ETFs are live and authorized participants start buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of XRP off exchanges that don't have inventory, you're going to see price discovery that makes people uncomfortable. That's according to Jay Claver. The price will make people uncomfortable, and hopefully for the right reasons. The exchange liquidity is the lowest it's ever been. The supply shock we've been talking about is mathematical, not conspiratorial. And the real games start when institutions have to compete for the actual tokens in the market instead of these underlying futures contracts, which have zero impact on the price. But guys, if you agree, smash that like button. If you disagree, leave a comment in chat. But it's very rational because I've been talking about it for an extremely long time. There is billions of dollars worth of demand for these tokens right now. That's why these products have been filed with the SEC. And the most important part about this, again, there's a lot of important aspects of this, but is that these institutional clients do not have access to XRP right now. These vehicles do not exist. It's not like there's OTC trading where they can launch some underlying ETF. We got a hybrid product by a small company in Rex Osprey, but there's no main companies like a Grayscale, Franklin Templeton that are offering spot XRP to their clients today. The moment that is available, we will see billions of dollars in demand come into these products, and we don't have to speculate because I've showed you the data, guys. Look at what happened for Rex Osprey. This is a smaller company. They launched a hybrid XRP product that's about 80% XRP, 20% other assets, and it was the largest ETF for any asset that was launched in the calendar year of 2025. Out of 717 brand new ETFs, the XRP Rex Osprey ETF was the top performing product in America for this calendar year. So I can't emphasize that enough. Time and time again, we see there's huge demand for the XRP product and quite frankly for Solana as well, guys. So we don't talk a lot about Solana because I don't own a lot of Solana. But when I look at some of these articles and I read the demand, when I read the room, Solana is getting that Ethereum free pass 2.0. Every single big investor is excited to talk about Solana. They're excited to talk about the power and potential of this. They're excited to talk about the power and potential of this blockchain technology, but they skip over a larger asset in XRP. And I think that it was much easier to promote the Solana narrative when the market caps went Bitcoin 1, Ethereum 2, Tether 3, Solana 4. Those were the days for the Solana community because they had all the narratives kind of working in their favor. It's very difficult to rationalize a Solana conversation when you completely skip past XRP and the amazing things that they've created. So it's going to work in our favor in the long run. But I do want to play this brief clip here.
Now, most of the investors that we speak to, these financial advisors and RAs, don't know that much about crypto, or they're early on in their journey. And so they're excited about Bitcoin. They've maybe heard about Ethereum because they hear about stablecoins and tokenization. Maybe they've heard about Solana. But once you get past those assets, we really don't get a lot of questions. Maybe XRP, maybe the Cardano question every once in a while. So I think it's going to take time before flows go into those assets, certainly. I do think there will be more crypto enthusiast investors who do want to go out down the risk curve and they want to choose the lower cap assets. Now, most of the investors that we speak to, these financial advisors and RAs, don't know that much about crypto.
That sentence is the most important, guys. I shared a personal story this weekend where I was able to speak to somebody who's very successful in their trade, and they have a big portfolio of everything but crypto. And he said his financial advisor still doesn't think it's essential to have crypto allocated into your retirement portfolio, into many of the things that we use to preserve our wealth. So it hasn't gone mainstream. There is still a lot of people, millions and millions of Americans, who do not take this asset class seriously. You know when they will? When their financial advisor calls them and tells them to take this asset class seriously. And my belief is we're only a few months away with the passing of the Clarity Act and the approval of these XRP ETFs, as well as dozens of other altcoin applications that exist at the SEC today. But we did just pass 350 likes. Just wanted to give a huge thank you to anybody who enjoys this content and participates in the live chat. If you want to help us out, totally free, smash that like button. I do want to give a special thank you to Terry Anderson for the donation. We are going to be addressing the donations at the end of the program. Big thank you to Terry, the official owl of the Good Evening Crypto community, guys. Shout out to Terry and his owl out there. But we're going to get into another clip because I think it's another relevant piece of data here. I do have two things that I'm excited to show you guys. So first of all, we're going to get into this clip from Jed McCaleb, who's talking about how he would have been more successful if he bought Bitcoin and held it instead of holding XRP and starting Stellar. That's a fascinating clip, and we're going to have to spend a couple of minutes breaking down what he's really getting at here. But I wanted to start off with this information, which is discussing why the RLUSD is being minted on the Ethereum network. And I've told you guys time and time again, the majority of decentralized apps, the majority of DeFi liquidity and DeFi transactions, they take place on Ethereum. So RLUSD is essentially infiltrating that ecosystem and is slowly bringing new liquidity over onto the XRP ledger. Well, we're going to listen to a Ripple developer right here explain why tapping into the Ethereum network is so important for the RLUSD stablecoin, and he validates the narrative we've been saying on this show for a very long time.
With the XRPL EVM, I think it is smart to move to the biggest ecosystem in the world because what it does is it unlocks interest to a whole swath of Ethereum developers, right? The fact that you're built on an EVM enables that. XRPL EVM is built on Cosmos. And being built on Cosmos gives you access to something called the Axelar Bridge. The Axelar Bridge makes you cross-chain immediately. It's the XRP asset that makes the XRPL EVM an exciting destination for development. The XRP asset itself is extremely unique relative to its peers. Why? First, it is pitched as a cross-border payment neutral asset. The one thing that it does that no other asset in the history of this space does is that it's stood up against the US legal system and won multiple times. And in doing so, it has an awe of credibility, more so than any other asset. But now that it's accessible on the biggest developer-friendly ecosystem in the world, takes XRP off its island, puts it into the biggest developer ecosystem, and allows this asset to flourish.
There you have it, guys. And that minute clip says everything we need to know about why the EVM sidechain is so important. Now, the most important thing our listeners need to understand about the Ethereum network is that stablecoins and smart contracts right now are dominated by Ethereum. The majority of stablecoins, the majority of smart contracts in the crypto ecosystem, they exist on the Ethereum network. Now, why does that work in our favor as XRP investors? Because we're able to tap into that ecosystem with both the RLUSD stablecoin and the EVM sidechain being live. This now means that the EVM sidechain is live. All of the developers, all of the millions of people who are building on Ethereum, they're now going to be able to launch those decentralized apps on the XRP Ledger blockchain as well. So they're going to be able to tap into the XRPL ecosystem and really expand on their decentralized apps, maybe tap into better liquidity, create more DeFi applications for the ecosystem. Very exciting, guys. And I think that most people are undervaluing just how much development is really happening behind the scenes for many of our favorite projects. But I wanted to start off by talking about, I wanted to get into this topic today, breaking down how Ripple was invited to the White House to celebrate Trump's donors during the election with the White House ballroom dinner. And this is pretty exciting, guys. Trump has invited his biggest donors to a glitzy, I'm not sure what that means, White House dinner celebrating the $250 million ballroom, which is now under construction. The event pulls in the who's who of financiers and power brokers, easy to stay in the president's orbit. Now, of course, we're going to check out the list. And as you guys can tell, there is some A-list companies on this list. You've got Tether, you've got T-Mobile, you've got Microsoft, you've got Google, you've got Amazon, and of course, the Winklevoss twins and our favorite, Ripple, right there. So if you guys can't see it, I'm zooming in. Right underneath Palantir, you've got Ripple. And if that isn't ironic, I don't know what is. Do your Palantir research, guys. Going to be a very important company going forward. But I think this speaks volumes about the industry because the number one thing that Brad Garlinghouse has said time and time again is that this presidential administration is willing to work with crypto participants. They're willing to speak to Cardano. They're willing to speak with Chainlink, and they're definitely willing and able to speak with Ripple and XRP. This White House dinner is another example how the correlation between Ripple and the U.S. government is growing stronger by the day. And the ballroom, I'm not going to focus too much on the ballroom. Like, very cool. Congratulations. I'm excited about it. I don't think I'll be attending any events at this room, But big shout out to Donald Trump. Looks beautiful. On a more important note, I think it's very exciting that once again, Ripple is going to be in the room with some of the most powerful executives and companies on the planet. And you guys will probably find it valuable. So I just wanted to go through the list very briefly and show you many of the other companies that are going to be in attendance, because it's not some niche group. It's not some small group of outsiders. It is the biggest, most powerful companies in America today that have been called into the White House to celebrate this ballroom. But guys, we got 3,300 live listeners. Massive thank you to anybody who enjoys this new channel. If you enjoy my new channel, show us some love, smash that like button. Again, GEC, I'm giving you the 11 a.m. updates. Then I come back at you for the 5:30 p.m. updates. And during today's 5:30 p.m. update, I'm going to be showing you that Patrick Bet-David conversation about XRP and why it speaks volumes to where this industry is headed over the next couple of years. But as for who was in attendance for the White House event, we've got blue chip companies like Amazon, Apple, Caterpillar Inc., Coinbase is going to be in attendance, Comcast, Hard Rock International, shout out to the Hard Rock, Google, Lockheed Martin. Everybody knows them. Very important military company. We've got the Meta platform. We've got Microsoft in attendance. We've got Palantir. We've got Ripple, T-Mobile, Tether. Let me see if there's any notable names here, guys. And maybe I'm just uninformed as to how important some of these other names are, but I just wanted to highlight the big ones. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, Paolo. Yeah, that pretty much appears to be it, guys. So again, these are the biggest donors for Donald Trump's campaign. And these are the people who have the most powerful voices and the most influential voices behind the scenes when it comes to where this market is headed over these next couple of years. But we're going to start diving into this clip right here. Charlie, this is a big one. Charlie Lee admits he should have held Bitcoin instead of starting Litecoin. Well, now Jed McCaleb is admitting the same. He should have just held his Bitcoin instead of starting XRP. You heard that correctly, guys. Let's listen to what Jed has to say.
It did. Not to be crass, but you make billions of dollars from Ripple.
Yeah, I did. But, yes. I mean, I think anyone that was in crypto early, honestly, like if I had just bought, if I had just like held my Bitcoin, I would have made more than any of this. Like, so sometimes like I should have just held Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So guys, I want to play that one more time just so our listeners understand. Here it is.
Not to be crass, but you make billions of dollars from Ripple.
Yeah, I did. But, yes. I mean, I think anyone that was in crypto early, honestly, like if I had just bought, if I had just like held my Bitcoin, I would have made more than any of this.
So think about that, guys. Anybody who's been in the XRP community since 2019, 2017, you know about the Jed McCaleb narrative probably better than anyone else on the planet. Jed McCaleb was an original founder of Ripple. And there was a big settlement. He left in 2014 to go and establish the Stellar Network. He went and he built XLM. And we've seen that ridiculous correlation between the two XRP price charts, where every time XLM is moving, XRP is moving, and where every time XRP is moving, XLM is quickly following behind. Well, during the major settlement that occurred for Ripple, when Jed McCaleb left the company, he was given several billion XRP, but it was required that he sell those XRP before a certain date. So I believe he finished selling those XRP sometime in the summer of 2023, might have been the summer of 2022, if I'm remembering correctly. And that was a huge moment for the entire industry, because for us as XRP investors, we felt like that huge amount of sell pressure that was in the market from Jed McCaleb. 11 billion units of XRP is what he ended up selling, or maybe it was $11 billion that he made. I'll have to check that. Live chat, let me know, how many units of XRP did Jed McCaleb actually sell into the open market? It's several billion at least. Well, Jed McCaleb said here, he profited billions of dollars, and he's still saying it would have been more profitable to hold Bitcoin. Here's the question that I have for our live chat today. And it was only 4 to 5 billion units of XRP. So I just want to confirm that, be accurate for our listeners. Do you believe, live chat, that Bitcoin or XRP will be more successful from a return on investment standpoint between now and 2030? One's for Bitcoin, two's for XRP. Do you think Bitcoin will continue to have a higher return on investment than many of these other altcoins? Because I disagree. I think so much has changed structurally in this market, and it's more obvious than ever. Some people are saying 9 billion. So I got to get accurate with my reporting here. But the live chat is basically confirming exactly what I predict. The floodgates are open, guys. The gloves are off. We're throwing haymakers here in the crypto space, especially for the XRP community. And we are going out and acquiring companies, taking those existing businesses and bringing them onto the XRP ledger. And we got a big announcement about this yesterday out of Africa, where Ripple is now tapping into ABSA, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, to bring bank-grade crypto custody into South Africa. And now this isn't some small company or some minor collaboration here. This company is a major bank in South Africa managing $120 billion worth of assets. So $2 trillion worth of their South African currency, which is equal to about $120 billion worth of assets at the end of 2024. They also saw $6.3 billion worth of revenue last year. Well, Ripple said this partnership was a result of growing demand for secure, compliant digital infrastructure across emerging markets. And Ripple's narrative from day one was about banking the unbanked. And so I'm going to tie these two conversations together here about Bitcoin being less profitable than some of these other assets like XRP. XRP right now is tapping into other economies, other countries all around the world, and onboarding those new investors into the space. They're not focused on some short-term price action. They are focused on developing over the next several years. And that's why I think collaborations like this one, the one in Africa, last week we had a collaboration in the Middle East, this is going to drive more and more demand that stays on the ledger and never leaves. You tokenize real world assets on the ledger, that value now exists on the blockchain. You talk about minting stablecoins that are applicable to the XRP ledger. Those new stablecoins will also grow and expand onto the XRPL. Now, guys, you're calling for it. There must be some major price action happening in the market. We're going to check out the trading view for XRP right now because it appears people are talking about a big correction. Now, when I was looking at the XRP price chart last night, just keeping an eye on some pivotal ranges, that $2.30 price target was really something to look for. So again, I'm not entirely sure about the price action and where we are today, but for me last night, $2.30 right here. If we can hold this support, I'm anticipating we're A-okay here. But if we lose that support, I think we're going to come all the way back down to about a $2 price target for XRP. And I said this would be totally normal because back in 2017, when we had this massive liquidity wick, it wasn't like we just recovered from this and it was off to the races. We actually went down and sideways for a couple of weeks. I believe it was 17 days. And then the XRP price chart broke out. So if XRP trades down and sideways for the next week and a half or 2 weeks, wouldn't be anything really different from what we saw in 2017 before we had the price run of the century. But I'm going to ask you guys one more question. Are you bullish on XRP? One's in the chat for yes, two's in the chat for no, because I'd like to hear if the XRP community is still excited and optimistic about many of the predictions that they were talking about just a couple of months ago. I mean, there was people in the live chat who were giving us a lot of flack because I was thinking the next breakout should take us between 450 and 530. And they're like, Abs, that's way too low. Listen, guys, we get a 450, we get a 530 XRP. That's going to be some awesome wealth for the entire XRP community. And maybe that's just the beginning. I'm not calling for the market top at those prices. I'm just saying when I look at where the breakout could take us, those are some of the ranges that I'm keeping an eye on. And I did have an analysis saved in my bookmarks, kind of breaking this down. So bear with me here for just a moment as I'm going to go to my bookmarks and kind of pull up that TA that I wanted to read for you guys. Because again, the most important thing right now is that Bitcoin is dictating the price action for the altcoins. And I don't think XRP is going to have any big separation moment this fall. What we really need to see is momentum come back into this market, Bitcoin getting daily closures above 120,000, and then projects like XRP will begin kicking off and outperforming. Someone said, or big shout out to Love Stocks, Abs, have Clinton on the show. He's good with TA. Shout out to Clinton. We do have Super G for TA. Shout out to Gonzo out there, guys. But we got 4,000 live listeners here. If you're enjoying this content and you like this XRP price discussion, smash that like button. It greatly helps us out. And it's a very free and easy way to help us grow this brand new channel. We're already at 480 likes. Be phenomenal to pass 500 here, guys. But we're going to show you this chart right here, which is XRP got moved down to our support level for the expanded flat we were following. Now, it's important to note, I said it'll happen pretty soon, but I don't expect it to play out like that. We got a nice 50% bounce off our support level. And regardless of how things unfolded last week, the plan is still the same. This user is anticipating a $5.50 breakout for the XRP price target. And that's just level one. Again, we're going to have to take this step by step. I've called it the stairway to heaven on several different occasions because I think that XRP, it's going to go to 450. And then we're going to trade down and sideways, and then we'll get our next leg up. But this massive decoupling event that I'm anticipating is going to happen during the bear market. I don't think it occurs here anytime in early 2025. I just don't think it's going to occur in the calendar year of 2025. 5, to be quite honest with you guys. But if you disagree, let me know in the live chat because I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. Someone said, dang it, I bought so much yesterday too. Don't worry about that because once again, if you're buying below your dollar cost average, you're doing yourself a favor. Someone said, wrong, fake news in the live chat. I'm not sure what I got wrong, but they're calling it out in the live. I want to give a huge thank you once again, guys, for just showing up, supporting this new show. This is the biggest thing we need to keep an eye on. The price action for Bitcoin will determine the success of the altcoins going forward. And with what I've seen thus far, my anticipation is this journey for Bitcoin is going to start getting excited towards the back end of the year. But I'm going to begin wrapping it up here for today. I want to give a huge thank you and shout out. I'm going to be recording that video earlier on. So funny. Someone texted me. They were so upset. And I read the text. They forgot their coffee at home. So shout out to the person who left their coffee. But guys, I am going to be wrapping it up. Later on today, I'm going to get you that Patrick Bet-David breakdown. I'm really excited about that video. But people were commenting. They're like, we don't want to watch the same clips in the morning that we do in the afternoon. So going forward, I'm not going to blend any of the content. I'm going to keep the morning show with the morning specific content. And you guys are going to get brand new updates every single day, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. I'm really excited about how committed I am. And I think we're going to do some great work. By we, I mean Johnny Krypto and myself. So shout out to Johnny Krypto as well. As for the donations, big thank you for the $5.89. Abs, can I get my golden wrench? The best show ever. Here's my deal, Richard. Richard, comment right now. I'm going to go to the YouTube and I'll make sure you get that wrench because I know you're here every single day supporting the show and I can recognize that. I also want to give a big shout out to Terry Anderson. Terry said, thank you and cheers to everyone in GEC. Always a great show. Thank you very much, guys. We're going to continue to improve and evolve here. And I've got some amazing things that I'm thinking about and working on. So get ready. I'm going to plan some really exciting things, and I think you guys are going to appreciate it. And I want to give a huge thank you to Ghost for the 99 cents. Much appreciated, Ghost. And thank you for that 99-cent donation. Massive thank you, guys. Anybody who enjoyed today's content, it'd be great if you can help us out. Smash that like button. We love and appreciate you guys. And if you want to copy and follow the same strategies I implement, the two things I'm currently using, I'm using ITrust Capital and I'm using Merlin. Now, the best part about Merlin, click on the link below, sign up for 30 days completely free. You do not have to pay. This is going to allow you to track all your crypto in one location. You can create a profit plan for yourself so you know exactly where to cash out during this crypto market. But it's also going to give you a realistic perception of what's possible. If you've got 10,000 units of XRP, you guys could really have some fun with the Merlin tool, kind of seeing where your price targets can go over these next couple of years. But we love you guys. We appreciate you all. Like I always say, we'll see you all in the next one. Have a great day.